This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Forging Table. The mission of Undaunted.Life is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. At the Forging Table, you'll see a group of regular guys forging spiritual resilience by digging into God's Word, and we're welcoming all of you to come along on that journey with us. That's Adam, that's Caleb, and the first appearance since the announcement that you are Joby Martin's favorite forging tabler. Well, thank you so much, Ryan Horn. We are so blessed to be in your presence.
I'm blessed to be in your presence.
Oh, no, I thought you were going to say I'm blessed to be in my presence too, because that would have been the greatest of all comebacks.
Yeah, no, I'm just still surprised Joby picked me.
That's okay. So, well, why are you surprised?
We all are.
Because I would be too. I was like, man, you got that good-looking guy, Winkler. You've got Super Stash, Matt Grassmeyer.
Right.
You got Eric. You got this guy over here. He had one episode, and we lit it up. So I guess, you know what? My soteriology is just on point. So
according to him, it works out okay. Yeah. But I will say this. Go ahead.
Oh, I do have a new nickname. I no longer go by the Horn.
Did you give yourself this nickname too?
Well, I mean, I'm just the forging tabler that Joby loved.
That is such a long name, but I want you to get a name tag with that on it. Because I thought about getting you like a medal or a trophy or something like that, and then maybe it just didn't really seem quite right.
No.
Okay.
I mean, no. I'm still surprised. It was an honor to hear it. Did not expect it. So.
Well, we definitely know it's going to go to your head. So I will say this, but one thing we need to talk about from the beginning is just asking the table, just your opinions. Does it make you more manly or less manly if you travel with your own salad?
Oh, man.
Does anybody, like, just in general, just overall thoughts? What are your thoughts?
Knee-jerk reaction is no.
Knee-jerk reaction is no from Caleb.
I've never seen it happen before. This is the first time.
Well, you would have seen it happen had you been in my kitchen about 10 minutes ago, because the forging tabler that God and Joby loved, Ryan Horn, opened up my fridge, and he wasn't getting something out of it, which would have been completely acceptable. He's putting something inside of it. And what he put in there was completely unacceptable. And it was his own salad with dressing, Did
you bring a rabbit with you to eat it?
I didn't.
No?
I'm going to eat it on my own. So just to give you guys a little rundown, 2 weeks ago, I invited somebody over to my house. Was it 2 or 3 weeks ago? I think it was 3 weeks ago. And this person fat shamed me.
Oh.
Yeah. Really bad. They're like, bro, you need to go work out. I'm like, hey, man, I've been getting up. I go walking and everything. He's like, walking? Comes back 30 minutes later with a 30-pound rucksack. I've been doing that Tuesday, Thursdays, and then hitting the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the last 2.5 weeks. And I have to eat a salad. I'm intermittent fasting from 12 to 6, and I knew that you were going to have a bunch of meat, and I need something to process all that meat. So I eat a salad for fiber and all that jazz.
I don't know who this guy that fat shamed you was, but he sounds handsome and incredibly
He's a debonair
smart.
redhead.
And hey, I will just say, people think that shame is not a positive motivator, but I did fat shame you in love, right?
You did. It was total love. And I was like, and I listened. I was like, you know what? He's right. And he also got on me because he's like, dude, get up in the morning and do it. Like, I've been getting up at 6 a.m.
Yep.
And it's been great. So I get up at 6 a.m. I've been listening to the verses that we're going over. I walk. I listen Tuesdays and Thursdays to the Forging Table. So I got to hear the Chandler episodes, which were really great. But I mean, it's a good thing. I'm glad you did it. But yeah, that's why I eat a salad. So
well, and the cool thing is I
eat a salad because of you.
Okay. Well, God, that's like the worst compliment. That's like the most underhanded compliment that could have come my way. But I will say this, like you were planning on doing something. And so like you were just planning on going walking, but I'm like, well, you're not 80 years old, so walking's not necessarily like exercise, but like literally just throwing a 30-pound ruck on your back. So it was a go ruck, so it's got like a nice like slot where you put the weight in, so it's not like 30 pounds worth of something, sloshing around in your backpack. Yep. And so you're able to walk around and you're doing the exact same exercise, but you're elevating your heart rate. You're doing so much more like from a muscular standpoint as well, just by having the weight on your back. And Adam, I know you do quite a bit of rucking as well to get ready for like hunts and stuff like that.
Yeah, man, that's the first I've heard you say this. I'm proud of you, dude. That's freaking awesome.
It's been great, dude. I get up I go to the gym, I go to the Y, I do like 30 minutes of cardio, and I do about 30 minutes of weights. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I go rucking. Sometimes I push my son.
Dude, let's
2-year-old. Yeah, so it's great.
Let's go to the lake and go do it.
Go to the lake and go do it.
At Lake Arcadia, they got a big hill you can go up and down. There's big signs that say "Don't do it." Doesn't matter. Just go do it anyway.
I'm 2 weeks in, so
so by week
you work up to that.
Yeah,
You're ready for that.
Yeah, week 3 you'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm to the point where I'm jogging downhill now.
Okay, see, well, that's the other thing. So I learned this from a Green Beret who, they ruck all over the place. And so what they say is like, okay, so like in our neighborhoods that we all live in, there are places where there are uphills, downhills, and basically flat. And so it's you're walking when it's uphill. When it's flat, you do like a little scoot, like a little trot. And then when it's downhill, you jog. And so like that's how you can take advantage of the terrain without absolutely destroying your body or your cardio or something like that. And so again, if you're rucking or doing something like that, walk the uphills, kind of scooch the flat ground, and then run the downhills. And so that'll certainly help as well.
The other thing I started adding in is on once I started getting comfortable with the pack, I would on my watch every 5 minutes I would stop and do 20 push-ups and do 30 air squats. And then when I was done with that, go again and just keep going and try to go for 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And by then you've cranked out quite a few push-ups.
And 30.
I'm working up to that.
Well, it sounds like when you say 30 pounds, it doesn't sound like a lot.
It's a lot.
Until you put it on your backpack and put it on your back.
My wife put it on, and she's like, I made it down the block.
Yeah.
She's like, you do 2 miles in this? I was like, yeah, I do 2 miles.
Good for you, dude.
Yeah,
that's
so
rough.
it's been good. And I like salad.
There's no, well, gosh, man, I was going to say there's no good way to transition. Then you mentioned salad again, but that's okay. So we're going to get into the 23rd Psalm today. And so would y'all say this is the most famous of all the Psalms? Like I was trying to think of one that would be in competition with this one, and I just know one immediately came to mind. But one thing about this Psalm specifically is this is where we, talk about going through the valley of the shadow of death. And one of you at this table I know has gone through that recently because you had to attend 5 girls' soccer games and 2 little kids' birthday parties in one day. And now you're here recording the Forging Table. Adam, how are you upright? I don't quite understand it.
I'm not sure how I made it. I don't even know if I'm still here, really. I might still be on the soccer fields.
Like when you text me about what you were going to be doing before you got here, I was just like, wait, you're still coming, right? Yeah. Like I don't know that I would want to do anything for the rest of the week after that.
No, I was about to cancel, but I decided to go ahead and come because I love you so much.
Oh, see, I'm getting the love so far. Caleb, do you have a story about how much you love me? Because we've checked off 2 boxes so far. No.
Nope.
No. Okay. Makes sense. You can't have too much love for a ginger.
Ain't bad.
But we've kind of been having fun and all that from the beginning. But this is a psalm that we really all have to reckon with. And before we read it, I do want to talk a little bit about the valley of the shadow of death. And I didn't preempt this. I didn't tell you guys anything because you don't want to surprise someone and make them talk about it. But it's hard to really understand this psalm unless you feel like you've actually walked through the valley of the shadow of death. And so I do want to open it up to see if y'all have any stories that you would be comfortable sharing about a time when you went through. While you're thinking about that, I talked about this on the show before, and I'll just mention it again briefly. When James was 6 weeks old, we had to take him to the emergency room for something, some intestinal issues, and they said, hey, if any of these symptoms pop up, you have to come back. And those symptoms popped up around 3:00 in the morning. Just horrible 6-week-old baby. We go taking off in the middle of the night to go back to OU Children's Hospital. And to kind of speed the story up just a little bit, they tried to manually fix the problem, like his intestines were out essentially. And so they tried to get him back where they needed to be. Nurses couldn't do it. And another nurse couldn't do it. The supervisor for the nurses couldn't do it. And so the last thing basically keeping our 6-week-old from going into emergency surgery at, 4:00 in the morning or something like that, was the surgeon actually coming in, and he was actually able to put the intestines back. And we were like, oh, this is great. And he's like, well, that means we don't have emergency surgery. That means we have surgery like at 10:00 this morning, like later today. And so the hours that are ticking by, and all of y'all were getting text messages from me at this time, and like just every minute that ticks off before you're like, I'm gonna have to hand my 6-week-old baby to a nurse and maybe never see him again. And I'd be interested what y'all have to say, but for me, becoming a first-time father, I didn't have a lot of those feelings that a lot of people say, like, oh, my life changed in that moment and everything clicked right into place. For those first 5-6 weeks, I was like, what do I do? Like, how do I, because it's not really connecting with you. You're just trying to keep mom alive while she keeps the baby alive. It's kind of what you're doing. But that was like the first moment where I felt like I really like, oh, I love this thing. Mm-hmm. And, that was when, Adam, you called me mid-morning that morning because we left in the middle of the night and we had no regard for anything else. So we have 2 dogs that live at our house, and we weren't worried about someone taking them out or feeding them or watering them. And all you did was you called me, and you didn't say, hey man, I'm thinking about you, praying about you, or hey man, if there's anything I do for you, let me know. You were like, I'm literally on my way to your house right now. Let me know how to get inside so I don't have to break a window to take care of your dogs. And so when I talk about a foxhole buddy, a 3 a.m. friend, a I'm on my way friend, like that's kind of that's the story where all that comes from. But I mean, I can literally feel the coolness of the room that we were in, like waiting to get him out because you're in this freezing cold room, but you're sweating because you're so nervous. And so I can still like feel the valley of the shadow of death, even as I sit here right now. So again, we don't have to go around and everyone has to give their worst story possible, but I did just want to kind of open it up because if you've never walked through it, it's really hard to really reckon with this psalm.
I have a similar story. We were at the lake probably 10 years ago, and my father-in-law and I had just gotten to our spot to start fishing, and my phone rings, and it's Cassidy, and Cassidy says, "Get back right now. My oldest daughter is having a seizure." It's like, well, that doesn't sound good. So we got back to the house as fast as we possibly could, rush her to the hospital at the lake, and get her checked out, and ends up being okay. And I guess there's this thing called a febrile seizure. And a febrile seizure is when you're young, for whatever reason, your body doesn't regulate temperature very well. And for some reason, that spike in temperature causes you to have a seizure. We call Cassidy's mom, because Cassidy's mom is a nurse, to explain this to her. And Cassidy's mom says, "Oh, yeah, you had those. Oh, yeah, they're hereditary. It's pretty normal. She's probably going to have more." And we almost lost it because we were like, we had no idea. We thought this was a life or death situation. Thought our oldest daughter's about to die. It's just a seizure. Oh, it's just a febrile seizure. So,
yeah, our second son, Sam, when he was about 5 months old, he started having seizures. And he was diagnosed with something called West syndrome, which really, it actually got to the point where they were basically saying, like, we don't know what the future holds for him. And not as in like it's, premature death or anything, but basically like we don't know if he's going to be able to talk. We don't know if he's going to be able to walk, tie his shoes, any of that stuff. And he was 5 months old, so it was not only in that short, he was in the hospital for a couple weeks. He was getting to where he was having 30, 40 seizures a day. But it wasn't until, he's 3 years old and he starts doing some of these things that we're like, okay, we think it's going to be all right. So that absolutely was the closest thing that I would call the valley of the shadow of death for us, as our second son going through that.
Kind of had a similar situation. Our youngest son, Henry, when he was born, my wife had C-sections. And with those C-sections, you're not going out the normal route. And so usually through those contractions, you push all the liquid out of your body, all the liquid that's in your lungs and everything. Well, when he came out, he was like, they could not drain all the liquid. So the baby, he was still blue and they're trying to give him oxygen. And I was in there with him for about like 40 minutes. And they were like, well, let's put him on his mom and see if that helps. Because he was like sticking around 74 to 79. And so we go in there. That's not working. They bring in the NICU. And like, you're just like, all these things are going through your head. Like, oh man, like it was tough, but we were relying on God. And like the NICU main nurse comes in and she like does another suction and everything. And then she's like, if this doesn't work, we're going to have to take him back to the NICU. And like, that's the last thing you want to do. And all of a sudden he just started, his breathing got normal. And it was just, praise God. But yeah, that's like the closest to the valley of death I think I could think of. So
Obviously all of us around the table we've listened to Joby's sermons and Joby's been here and all that, but he has a quote that he says all the time at his church where there's no pain like kid pain. And all of our stories just surrounded, our progeny, like our children. And so for a lot of you guys listening, when you go through the valley of shadow death, it's not a surprise when it's having to do with people that you love. Like there certainly are situations where maybe it's a bad diagnosis for you, but part of the reason people feel that angst and that anxiety when they get a negative diagnosis from the doctor is because of who that will affect if they, succumb to their disease or to their, their issue. So, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind, let's go ahead and read the entirety of Psalm 23. It's only 6 verses, but man, there's just, y'all know, y'all been studying it for weeks now. There's so much packed in these verses. So we'll just read the entire thing and then we'll just start breaking it down verse by verse.
Alrighty. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Fantastic. Nicely done. So when you got into verse 6, surely goodness, surely mercy, I could literally hear Shane and Shane singing that. So Shane and Shane, they have a song called Surely Goodness, Surely Mercy. But this is a psalm of David. It's a psalm of confidence. The subject is the people of Israel. Again, we've kind of established this is probably the most famous psalm. People that aren't even Christians are familiar with all of this. But just really getting into verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I don't know. I won't speak for you guys. I'll speak for me. When I hear shepherd, I think of guy walking around in the wilderness with a stick, right? That's typically the first thing I think about. That's the kind of like my default thing. It's just this docile person walking around like super bored, like no podcasts, like nothing to do with his time. But when you hear about what shepherds actually did, yeah, they were kind of the outcasts of society and things like that. But these dudes were some thugs. Like these were gangsters. Like they had to fight off animals, potentially like thieves and robbers and things like that. And so when I think about the concept of meekness in the way that it's supposed to be understood, which is, you know, a lot of power, but under voluntary control, I think you could put a shepherd into that category. And so just right here from the beginning, we have shepherding, and that's used throughout the Bible to describe God, how God shepherds us. Our pastors should be shepherding us. Like that's what they're going to have to give an account to God for in the future. But that was just right there from the beginning. How many times have I heard this and I just like kind of skip over the shepherd comment?
I looked at shepherd and I was thinking of like ancient cowboys, man. Like
Yeah,
that's what they are. They're like ancient cowboys without horses. And so like their job was to guide the flock and keep it safe. And I mean, that's what cowboys do when they're going after their you know, their herds. So I just think it's a great representation of you know, who Christ is. And, you know, John MacArthur says it's a job commonly used to describe God and the future of Jesus. And so it's like, man, God's like an ancient cowboy, man. He's like, we are his people and we're his flock and he's leading us and we just got to follow.
So you're saying this is like the Yellowstone psalm? Like this is like this basically
like literally like
a bunch of rips out there?
I just feel like if they end up doing like an ancient cowboy movie that Kevin Costner should play.
The shepherd.
Which, by the way, I know Angel Studios is coming around and doing a lot of this, but like when you read, especially the Old Testament, you're just like, is Russell Crowe's Noah really the best y'all can do? Or the 10 Commandments movie that was made like 60 years ago? Like, there's so many available movies and series from that.
I just watched Gods in Exodus or Gods and
is that the one with
Christian Bale?
Yeah.
Dude,
I never watched
it. So sacrilegious.
I've heard it was terrible.
It's horrible. Like God plays a kid. And like there's this part in there that just like I was watching it like just 2 or 3 weeks ago. And there's a part in there where God's basically like telling Moses the 10 Commandments. And he's like, yeah, you think these are good? Like he's asked, I was like, who's this guy? Jesse Duplantis? Like he's like, hey, God's asking him a question. Like, yeah, man, I need to know your opinion. You know? Wow. So I was just like, oh,
he might need feedback. You never know. Yeah. Christian Bale, the worst Batman, might need to give some feedback.
He's not the worst Batman.
Oh, are we about
George
to go there?
Clooney.
Are we about to go there?
Yeah.
Okay,
George
real quick,
Clooney.
so we don't go too far. Who's the worst Batman?
George Clooney.
George Clooney?
Agreed.
George Clooney.
Yeah.
Okay, Christian Bale's in the best Batman movies, but like he's like annoyingly bad. Like he's the worst part of all of those movies.
Have you seen the one with Robert Pattinson?
That's the new one, right?
The emo Batman. That might actually be the worst.
I mean, like it's Keaton, number one.
Keaton, number one.
All time. I go Bale second.
I do too.
And then Val Kilmer played a really good Batman.
He's got that great jawline. You know,
Yeah.
Val Kilmer's got that Batman jawline.
He was good, but those movies were trash.
Those movies, Joel Schumacher's film was trash.
Wait. Which ones were like the goofy ones with like Jim Carrey and Mr. Freeze? Was that the George Clooney ones?
George Clooney did the Mr. Freeze one, and Val Kilmer did Forever, which had Two-Face and the Riddler. Man, and those were directed by Joel Schumacher.
Val Kilmer's always going to be Doc Holliday, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
I'll be your Huckleberry.
Bringing it back to the Cowboys, that actually works out really well. Well, hey, since we're already like a little bit off, best Western, favorite Western?
Tombstone. Not even close.
Okay.
310 to Yuma.
310 to Yuma, which one? The old one or the new one?
The new one.
New one?
That's a tough one. I'm going to have to go with Hostiles.
Oh, gosh.
With Christian Bale.
Yeah.
Ooh, know it.
What's funny is I was thinking Hostels as well.
Were you really?
Because
I gotta make
that
because I didn't want to.
Scene is
The
like
first scene is so hard to get through.
No spoiler alert, but guys, if you have not seen Hostels with Christian Bale, woof. Like it is rough from the beginning. Like if you can't get through the first 5 minutes, like just save it. Just don't watch the rest of this. Watch the rest of this film.
If you can't tell already, I'm a huge Christian Bale fan.
Yeah, I guess we can tell. Are you a fan of his role of the machinist, where he basically got down to like 85 pounds to do a really bad movie?
I'm hoping to do that myself.
Please don't do that.
No,
He was
not
eating
like
like an apple a day. So if you come over next recording with only
Just
an
an apple and a leaf.
But
Wow.
hey, this is my fault. I'm the one that got us way off in the left field.
you know,
Let's come back to
I'll
Psalm
take
23.
Someone said this might be the Yellowstone song, which I think is true because if you go to verse 4, it says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I think that's talking about the train station.
It could be the train
yeah.
station.
It could
It's
be.
all
Train
Yellowstone
station right
fans.
between
Yeah.
Wyoming
Yeah,
and Montana.
it's been there the whole time.
Been there the
Yeah.
whole time. We didn't know.
Goodness gracious.
I do, like, you always hear this verse at funerals, though.
Yeah.
Like, this is like the funeral verse.
Yeah.
And then you also
the
hear
family.
this verse or this chapter or this psalm when Matt Chandler's taking down churches. So,
We're going to get there. Believe me, Ryan, we are super duper going to get there. So
I
hang
say
on
one more
tight.
thing?
Let's go.
So, I mean, yeah, this might be the most well known, but I feel like I think it's ironic that "I shall not want" is like the most unrelatable thing that we could read
Because we only want everything all the time.
We only want everything, and we should be the people that don't want anything because we have it all, right? But I do think the kind of the second part of that hammers it home that he makes me lie down in green pastures, which I mean, we're talking about sheep and a shepherd, but what do sheep do in green pastures? They eat.
Yeah, they get nourishment.
They eat. That's all they do. So if they're totally satisfied. They actually lay down in a green pasture. They do nothing.
but I like what you said about that. He makes me. He makes me. It's like God's telling you, rest in me.
And so what I'm going to do in this moment is I'm going to make you want, because I'm going to talk about a couple of things that you guys are going to want, and that's from our partners over at Crossway and Logos. So you thought you were content with your life and with all the things that you had in your library until this exact moment, because we've gotten you guys a forging table starter set through Crossway. Guys, all this is in the show notes. I'm not going to do the full-on commercial, but there are a lot of guys asking, hey, I want to start a forging table. What are some resources? Crossway has a 5-book set that you can get all 5 of those books for 50% off. All that's in the show notes. And also the Logos Bible software. I know some of you around this table have used that before. It is the most powerful Bible study software on planet Earth. And if you listen to the show, you can go into the show notes, use that link there, and you can get it at a discount. Ryan's used it for way longer than I have. He's very familiar with it. He's had to explain some of the stuff to me because I can barely use it sometimes. I feel like I'm not fully capable of going through that. But those are a couple of very, very fantastic things, guys. If you want to really get serious about studying the Bible and studying it with other men, that's a great way to get that going. But to keep this discussion going into, Caleb, you were getting into verse 2, but he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And so again, the pastures, that's where the sheep get nourishment. That's where the sheep feel safe. When it talks about restores my soul, that's where I wanted to kind of get through. And we haven't gotten to the valley of shadow of death. We'll get there in just a second. But if you've ever felt soul level anguish, then you know how big of a deal this is. But how many times do you just read this when life is going well and you never think of the he restores my soul? Because there are times that I've had times in my life where I'm like, I feel like my soul is being crushed. Last year, after the October 7th attacks by Hamas in Israel, I taught Sunday school 9 days after that happened.
2 weeks.
Yeah, it was inside of 2 weeks. And so I was going to talk about it on the show. And so I was like, I might as well talk about it Sunday school. I was going to be teaching Sunday school anyway, but I just completely scrapped the topic. And so I spent a week reading every account of what had happened, looking at all the pictures, watching all the videos, hearing all the horrible stories about, babies being put into ovens and being cooked alive and women being so brutally raped that they tore from this part of their body to that part of their body and all these types of things. And by the time I got to Sunday school, I felt like I didn't have anything left in me. And when I was done speaking to the class, at one point I couldn't even talk because I was just detailing some of the things that happened, and I couldn't get words out of my face. And I went to, hang out with some guys that night at our Sunday night, fight club thing. And I just told the guys, I was like, I feel like my soul has just been crushed. My soul has been put in a trash compactor. And that's stuff that didn't even happen to me, right? It just happened to other people. But man, if you've never gone through that, it's hard to even think about it.
I can remember when you were preparing for that because you were texting me about it when you were just at the end of it and like, man, I don't know how I'm going to get through this any further. And needed to lean on some guys to help you get through that. So I remember that being tough.
It's very rough. But the thing about this verse as well, and this, Ryan, really gets into our discussion about Matt Chandler. So for those of you that don't know the reference that Matt was talking about, because we talked about it in the second interview, part 2 of the interview I did with Matt Chandler. But years ago, Matt Chandler was invited by Stephen Furtick to come and preach at their Code Orange revival thing. And, Matt is still and was at that time one of the most sought after guest preachers and just preachers in general at the time. And he comes in there and like literally just melts the place down around Stephen Furtick kind of on accident. Like, we talked about it on the show, but then we talked about it a lot off air as well. And Stephen Furtick felt like Matt Chandler was just taking shots at him the entire time, even though Matt Chandler had delivered that same exact sermon to the Village Church like 2 or 3 weeks prior to the Code Orange revival. And so he didn't do anything unique specifically for that group. But essentially, he was talking about Psalm 23. So guys, if you just search Matt Chandler, Stephen Furtick on YouTube, it'll be the first thing that pops up. But he's just talking about, hey, like, look, why is God doing all this? For his name's sake.
Yep.
It's like, you're not the point. The Bible is not about you. Like, you're not David in the story of David and Goliath. And man, it's right here in Psalm 23. It's like, why is God doing this? He's doing this for him.
And that's the sad part about Furtick, though, after listening to that and what you just said, is that Furtick thought he was taking shots.
Right.
And that just tells you about Furtick. Like,
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
You should feel
100%.
some conviction.
You should.
Like, if your brother's coming at you with a verse and you're not even the thought, like, dudes must be full of himself because the whole time he's listening to that, he's thinking about himself. Just like when he reads the Bible, he's probably thinking about himself.
Right.
And so it's called Eisegesis, people. So,
Actually, define that for people that like
so
don't really know.
Eisegesis is like you draw out of the Bible what you about yourself in it rather than what the actual context is, which is exegeting. So if you go to a church that does expository preaching, they're going to go verse by verse, and they're going to give you the context of what that verse is. If you go to a church, and I'm not saying this, I'm using topical preaching. There is good reason for topical preaching, and not all topical preaching is bad. But if your church mainly does topical preaching sprinkled with some Bible verses, that's called eisegeting. So they're like, I have this one point that I want to make, and I'm going to use all these Bible verses to make that point.
This is the one where he's about 30 minutes in and they start playing music, right? And then he goes for like another 25 minutes.
His outro, because it's weird.
They're like, wrap it up.
Well, what's funny about that is like when I'm listening to people's sermons on podcasts and I hear the music come in, I'm like, all right, they're about to wrap it up. Like, I've already accepted Jesus. I don't need all this. And so like I just skip it. But I think there's literally like 16 or 17 minutes left in the sermon. He just like went right through it. Like he wasn't going to go with the Grammy shut up music. Like he just walked right through it.
They provided the emotionalism for him. Right. It's like, it's like usually when Furtick's trying to make his point, that's when they start the music.
Yeah, it's his story to share, but he shared some stuff with me off air about that whole deal that just was so weird because he was just flummoxed when he left because like he was taken to a separate green room. Like Furtick didn't come in and see him, and they just took him to the airport. He was supposed to go out to dinner that night, and Furtick's assistant came in and said, "Well, we're going to take you to dinner." Stephen got pulled away or something like that. It was just like this is really, really strange. And they were like, okay, what exactly is going on? One thing also I want to talk about in verse 3 is he leads me in paths of righteousness. So when we're discussing righteousness, because I will get questions all the time, I'll get DMs and I'll get emails from people, and it's like, hey, I got a couple of different options here and I don't know what to do. And for whatever reason, because, people have listened to me talk through my face hole for a few hundred hours, they think, hey, I should go to Kyle for advice. And so it's like, all right, well, I try to like do my best, even though I don't know anything about them or their situation. But just in general, as we see here in the 23rd Psalm, if the path doesn't lead to righteousness, then it's not the path that God has for you. Because sometimes it's so blatantly obvious, not knowing these people, not knowing anything about their life or their plight or whatever. It's like, one path that you're describing to me is so clearly not something that God would want anyone to do, much less you in your specific context and situation. And so I think that's helpful just for us as we're making decisions. And not every decision is a Robert Frost, road diversion, Yellowwood or whatever. I'm going to go left or go right. My life's going to be, irrevocably, unchangeable from that point forward. But it's one of those things to where it's like, if one path so clearly leads to unrighteousness, like, of course it's not from God.
Right. I think the second part of that kind of tells you, how you know if it is righteous, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, is it for his sake? I mean, it's just like the Furtick deal.
For him, or is it for you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, if you made this decision, like you prayed about it, right? And this is what you decided to do, that's different than this is what God's telling me to do.
And because if it was left up to you or me to make our own decision, I'm not going to be making the right decision. I'm going to do something of my flesh,
right?
Not what God would have me do.
So it's funny because we were joking off air about it, but I think this is an honest time to bring up something about that. When you talk about election, when you talk about a little bit about not predestination in the way to where it's like God's forcing your hand, but with what Adam just said, to where it's just like, okay, if left to our own devices, like we're going to return to our vomit because we are stupid dogs. And that's just kind of what a stupid dog does. I think that's an important thing to think about as well. Like it's hard because all the bad decisions are our fault, right? But all the good decisions, God gets the credit. So it's like we're literally just the middleman in every single one of the equations, which it may make you feel funny. It doesn't mean it's not true.
Easy,
but
if
you follow God, if you follow God and you make the right decision, you listen to the Holy Spirit, yes, he gets credit, but you also get credit for that as well because he's sanctifying you. And that's where you want to go back to paths of righteousness. Moody Commentary says, under God's care, we're constantly refreshed spiritually through him. And so we're sanctified by him and our spirit consistently renewed. And so when we follow his path and we follow it for his name, we're going to be sanctified in that. And go ahead.
No, so you and I have talked about this before because I was, what did I call it?
You called it
delayed sanctification. Yeah, okay, delayed sanctification. So what I meant by that, I talked about it with John Cooper last time I was on his show as well. But like for me, I become a Christian as a 10th grader. And, you have all this fire and, I bought my teen Bible, my extreme Bible, right? From the teenage section of the Salt Cellar Christian bookstore in Lawton, Oklahoma, next to Hastings. Shout out to Hastings. But so I get this and I'm super on fire and okay, let's go to Falls Creek and let's go to this camp and let's go to whatever. And then at some point you kind of, you read through the Old Testament and then you read through Genesis. You're like, all right, that was hard. But then you go into Exodus and then it's like, okay, and at some point you end up in Numbers and you're just like, I'm doing decent at my math class, and it's like I'm not doing decent with stuff here, and not hating on numbers here. But at some point you kind of bottom out. And so for me personally, I feel like I went through like a almost 20-year plane where I was just treading water, right? So you can never be in full stasis. You're either like sinking backwards or going forwards kind of a deal. But it was like, I was just waiting, sitting there, not really doing what I was supposed to do, not really seeking God, going to church, but just kind of to hang out, not digging into the word, not really doing any of that. And then all of a sudden, really a lot with the forging table and some of the stuff, it's like there was a bunch of sanctification happening all at the same time. A lot of it was awesome. Some of it was really hard and really difficult and really terrible. But that's kind of one of those things to where if you're not seeking out sanctification, like through the means that through which is a prayer life, a healthy prayer life, studying the word with someone older than you that knows a little bit more than you do. It's one of those things you don't want to be in this arrested development stage where you're just constantly treading water. But like for me, it's like I'm a young guy and I literally treaded water for decades at one point. And I just think about those guys that maybe go into their sage years having just been treading water this whole time.
I think
so common.
Yeah.
Do you feel differences about yourself when you're not in church, when you're not reading the Bible, when you're not surrounded by godly men, when you're not having discussions like this? Can you notice that and feel it and realize like, I am not who I should be. I can't come to the answers as quick as I should.
Absolutely. I see it in how I treat my wife and my kids.
Yep.
Like if I'm not into the word or I'm not getting the stuff that I need from you guys or from our church, like I can see myself getting into a selfish realm. And it's all about me. And like, I remember we had like a marriage retreat in Tulsa and my wife just like hit me with some bombs after like dinner. Like we got in a fight like all the way back from the restaurant to the retreat. Like people were texting me and it was about me being on my phone. So people are texting me like, hey, you guys okay? And I'm like, I'm not touching that phone right now. I was like, I don't have a death wish. But I remember saying something like, you know what? I just need this. Like, I do all this and I do all that. Give me this. And it was the most selfish thing you could possibly think and say. And I was like, man, I am not where I need to be.
Yeah, I can't relate.
Yeah.
Can't
yeah.
relate.
And so when she was getting on me about that and she was hitting me with some conviction, I was like, why are you attacking me? I went straight verdict. I was like, what's going on here? Like, I was making it all about me. And what it really is about me being a leader in my family. It's like, how do I need to step up and lead? And how can I be sanctified in this situation?
I read that restores my soul. Like you said, Adam, it's kind of, to me, it's a little bit like God reminding us who we are, giving us a reminder of the sense of, who you are in Christ. So I mean, I know that your situation you talked about was, regarding the whole Israel deal, but to me, it's a little bit of like, you've gone astray, come back. That's where I feel like restoration.
I would correlate it to exercise as well. I feel the exact same way. When I go through a period of time for a month or 2 months and I don't exercise, I'm not doing anything like I should be. And then I finally get back in it and it feels so good and reassuring. Your body feels better and you get better sleep. Same thing about being in the Word.
It's almost like you're getting a reset. And so for me, aside from surgery, I have not taken off more than a week from exercise since I was like 14 or 15 years old. And so like when someone's like, yeah, I didn't work out for a couple of years there, I'm like, a couple of years? Like, you should be dead. Like, how is this possible? But there are so many times when that's probably the easiest reset. So you got a little slovenly for a few weeks and it's like, all right, I need to take my medicine, go to the gym, accept this 2 or 3 days of sore that I'm gonna have to live with, but you hit the reset. But man, so many people, so many guys I know are cruising for a spiritual bruising because it's like, if you don't hit the reset button, it's going to get hit for you. Someone is going to reset you back to your factory settings, and this is going to be a massive problem. And again, you almost wish that it is God that does it, but sometimes when God hits the reset button on your life, there's a bunch of stuff that just got revealed, and there are like skeletons pulled out of the closet, and zombies have come out of the earth. Like it's something that you wish you would have done on your own. Like you wish you would have kind of gone there, but again, God is not doing it to torture you. He's doing it for your overall benefit.
And it's like what you guys said, like it's like exercise. Like you've got to get back into it. And like I've been told, I think that all the time, but I needed somebody to come at me with it and say, hey man, you need to get back in, you need to start doing it. It's like what Joby said, where, we kind of get down on churches who don't disciple. And it's like, sometimes when you're in that lull, or that you're going through that path, or you're coming back to, not doing what you're supposed to do, go and seek that discipleship. Like that's what you need to do as a man. You need to go and seek that discipleship and get back on track.
Let me read verse 4, then I'm going to come back to a comment about something you just said, Ryan. So even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. So unfortunately for some people, they have made so many bad decisions for so many years that at some point their valley to the shadow of death is something that was avoidable, right? So the statistics about obesity in this country, or like pre-diabetes, it's like 30% of children in America are pre-diabetic, right? Like that's an astonishingly high number. Like we are unique in the world. And well, we're unique in the world except for the other countries that we've exported our daily diet to, right? So we've exported our way of eating to other countries. And so their people are suffering in that way. But that's one of the things about the valley of the shadow of death, is because I had wanted to talk to you about your exercise and things like that, because you've had some ups and downs with that since we've known each other. But I was like, what's worse? Years down the road when you and I are still friends and still brothers, and something bad befalls you because of like some sort of physical ailment. Is that worse? Like walking with you through that? Or is it worse being like, hey man, I don't want you to die, so you should probably work out more, and just push some relational chips into the center of the table. Worst case scenario, I get punched in the face and get asked to leave, right? Because we were at your house, so kind of ballsy to, fat shame you in your own backyard.
And I made you pizza.
Right. Which was really conflicting for me, because I was like, that was not healthy, but I want to come back for pizza night. I definitely want that invite to come back my way. But that's it. That's again, the thing, guys, is that's why I encourage you to have those foxhole guys in your life. You need to be able to be that person willing to risk relational chips with other guys in your life, but you also need guys in your life that are willing to like risk some of those chips with you, and risk, worst case scenario, you punching them in the face, and they're doing it because they love you.
And you got to be a guy to listen.
Yeah.
Like I didn't get mad at you. I didn't tell you were wrong or get out of my house. I listened, and I'm like, yeah, you're right.
I was about to ask, is it harder to give it or harder to receive it?
I think it's harder to give it, because we had some conversations in the past that I gave you some stuff and you just shot me down.
Yep.
And so then it's really hard to like, all right, I need to go and get on this, brother. But like, you're such a dominating force that it's like, man, sometimes I'm afraid to give you advice, because like you can punch me a lot harder than I can punch you. So.
Which should not be taken into the calculus, but it's just one of those things. But you're right in that. And if you are someone that has more of a domineering personality, if you're going to invite guys into your life to be a foxhole brother, to check you when you need to be checked, it doesn't matter if you disagree. So Adam and I have had a few of those things where, the examples aren't important, but you agreed with my sentiment that I expressed in this particular context, but you completely disagreed with how I went about expressing it.
Sure.
And you told me that immediately. And I disagreed with your assessment, but I accepted it. I accepted the critique, and I put that into the, the calculus for future opportunities when I'm in a similar scenario. And so your advice is in there, even though I disagreed with fundamentally with what your problem was. How stupid would it be for me, which I've done, right? And I've done with you, Ryan, if you invite someone in your life to give you accountability, and when they express that accountability to you, you go, "Oh man, you don't know me. My life's been harder than you could ever imagine." And then you just basically turd vomit all over them. And it's like, this is not like beneficial for anybody. Because he's not going to be apt to share things with you again in the future. And if you're not going to accept it, you're not getting better.
And the great thing is we talked about that time, and you came back like, this is what I was thinking. If I would have known that at the time, it would have been a lot easier for me to come to you on other things, because it's like, man, now I know what he's thinking. Now I know what's going on in his head and why I can relate with you on what you're thinking. Even though I may not agree with it, I can at least relate to it. So
one thing as well that I wanted to get in with verse 4 is when we read through verse 4, again, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So a rod and a staff, they provide direction, but they also provide protection. Like a staff was not just a cool walking stick. This was a fighting stick as well. I think we pretty much covered that. But what I wrote down in my notes here is that this verse pretty much guarantees that God will allow us to suffer, that he will allow us to have trials and tribulations, but he's not going to abandon us in those trials. And I feel like a lot of modern Christianity, a lot of modern movements are, if things are going poorly, it's because you're not giving enough. If things are going poorly, it's because you're not praying hard enough. You're not coming to enough of our revivals. You don't have enough faith. And it's like, man, how can you read most of the Psalms of David and come away thinking the righteous will only have a nice, easy life? Again, let me just point you to the first 1,000 years of Christian history and all the stories of the martyrs. There's a fantastic book by William Bennett called Tried by Fire. It's about the first 1,000 years of the Christian church, and it details all kinds of different ways that Christians were executed. So everyone knows about being fed to lions in the Colosseum and being, set on fire for, what was it, Nero or Domitian or whoever it was, for them to have their Roman parties. But there were different Christians that were, they had one leg tied to one horse, the other leg tied to another horse, and they ran the horses in opposite directions and split them, ripped them in half. People taken to the top of a long flight of stairs, and they would be strapped to a bull, and they would, brand the bull and get it to run down the stairs. So they would be bludgeoned to death by the stairs, the whole running the way down. They were just coming up with unique ways of killing Christians. And it's like, so all that, you hear all that, and you think to yourself, life should be easy for me. I should be able to make as much money as I want. I should be able to look the way that I want for as long as I want. My kids can't be turds at any point during their lives. I just don't really understand how people get that, because when you just look at verse 4, he's going to allow you to go through it. He's just not going to abandon you there.
I think they miss out on Matthew and Luke, and they miss out on Jesus when they think that, because it's not a modern problem. I mean, this happened back in Jesus' time with the Pharisees. If you were blind or you were lame, there was sin in your life that caused that. And so, or if you had more money and everything like that, like the Pharisees had a lot of money, they were blessed. God had favor over them. And that's why Christ came and said, that's not the truth. That's not the truth. And we always move back into that sort of prosperity gospel type of thing, that if we're not prosperous or this isn't happening, God has something against us. And that's not the truth. It really isn't. And then, and that's the thing that he wants you to hear here is that fear no evil, for I am with you, or you are with me, And so that's what we have to understand is when you guys were talking, we were talking about our kids and we're going through those tough times, how much fear came through our minds.
That's all you can think.
All you can think about is the fear, but can you rest in him? Can we lie down in the green pastures with him during that time? Because he will be there to do that. He may not give you the money. He may not give you the house or whatever thing that you think you need or the job, but he will be there for you through the hard times.
I'll say I absolutely suck at this. I feel like I always have the answer. I always know what I'm going to do. I always know this problem is presented to me. Here's the solution. Here's the answer. I don't need any help. I don't need anybody else's opinion. I don't need to pray about it. I'm good. And so this is convicting for me because I know this is a weakness.
Yep. I wrote the note next to this, seems uncomfortable, because I mean that part for sure, but then like the rod and the staff, I mean, yes, it's used to fight off whatever's coming after the sheep, right? But also it's used for discipline for the sheep. I mean, it's used to hook their necks, and crack their legs and whatever it was. So, I mean, he says your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And that's like a mature David, I think, speaking to like, get back in line,
When David, very impetuous dude. Like we certainly see that throughout his life. Like he was a gaggle of bad decisions. And, if he had been, you could see God correcting him along the path, and he was either accepting the rebuke or not accepting the rebuke. And obviously he has a tremendous amount of lament, but it wasn't because of him being in God's like righteous favor or in his direction and his design for where he wanted him to go. It was literally the exact opposite.
And the rod and staff provided direction.
Right.
Like God was directing him. Now, that's where our free will comes in. Are we going to follow that? Are we going to follow that direction, or are we going to go with our flesh? Am I going to follow direction if I'm up on the roof seeing a beautiful lady bathing and walk downstairs and turn my eyes, or am I going to sit there and I'm going to oogle over it? I know the righteous way and what God wants for his path, but I also know what my flesh wants as well, and that's what we fight with every day.
Well, it's been elucidated ad nauseum at this point, but the people think the story with Bathsheba starts on the roof where he sees her bathing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Started way before that in his decision-making process to be away from battle, to be away from warfare where he should have been at that time, and instead to be at home. So I've used this example before, so if you've heard it before, just skip a minute and a half and you'll deal with it. But I had a buddy that was trying to kick dipping, right? And he was like, man, I just can't. He was just doing that thing where it's like, I just can't do it. I just don't know what to do. Kyle, what should I do? And I tried that. We'll just stop dipping. Like that's a great way to stop dipping, is just stop doing that particular thing. Man, you don't quite understand. I was like, okay, take me through the process of buying a can. Well, I just kind of walk into 7-Eleven. No. How'd you get to 7-Eleven? Well, I drove there. Okay, where was your car before it was at 7-Eleven? Well, it was at my house. Where was it? In the garage. Is there a door, that separates the house and the garage? Well, yeah. Okay. So you had to walk through that door at some point. But like, does your car just run without keys or anything like? Well, no, I had to find my keys. And so I got him to go all the way back to him sitting in his house on the couch thinking, I want to dip right now. And then it was, got to get up from the couch. Got to find my keys. Got to get my wallet. Oop, where's my phone? Got to go through the garage. Got to get into the car. Got to open the garage. Drive out. Get in, drive to 7-Eleven. Walk in. Pick the can. Purchase it. It was like this 57-step process to do that. And I was like, you made a bunch of decisions that did not take you down the path of righteousness. And you did the precise thing that you don't want to do. And so it's like, look at that, not as like, I was so compelled to go through all of these stop signs. It was that you made micro decisions every single step along the way because you had not pre-decided that I am not somebody that uses this product. Because again, that's why I preach pre-decision all the time. It's like, if he had pre-decided that he was never going to be away from his soldiers whenever battle was taking place, he never would have been on the roof. Like, he never would have seen Bathsheba. He never would have, had sex with her, never would have got her, pregnant at any point, wouldn't have killed Uriah. Like, all these things don't happen if he had just pre-decided previously that he was going to do something different. And so, that, again, that's a tremendous lesson for us to take from that particular part of Scripture as well.
For sure.
Let's go ahead and wrap up Psalm 23, verses 5 and 6. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So the thing that just struck me reading this passage, and it's not something I don't think I'd ever caught before, but in verse 5, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And so it's like, hey, let my enemies watch this goodness that you're doing for me. And so I've thought about different things that I've read in the history of warfare and things like that. And what you do before the enemy makes a huge difference as to the attitude or the morale of the enemy, right? So if you show cowardice before the enemy, it emboldens the enemy. And in this particular context, he's saying look, let my enemies watch what you are doing for me. And again, this is a psalm that is, this is a rough place for him. This is, a psalm of confidence, but it's coming from a place of pain. And so even with all that, he's like, look, I want you to show off and to show my enemies that they don't have power over me.
You feel the shift that happens in verse 5, and it goes from protection to God being host. And at this time now, he's hosting them at the table. His cup is overflowing. It's not only that he has what he needs, it's overflowing with everything in an abundance.
Yep.
It's very different than the first part of the
not only is God his protector, but he's his provider.
Right.
And like, and just seeing like, like when we prepare a meal for somebody, like we put the time and the effort. Like you just talked about your buddy going out and buying dip. Like when someone prepares a meal for me, like they went out to the store, they drove over there, they got it, they seasoned the meat, however they cooked it, and they spent that time and they did all that. And so like God's pouring that out. Like he's like, not only am I going to protect you, but I'm going to provide as well. So
I like the contrast between 6 and 4, just on the, we're talking about walking through the valley of the shadow of death, facing evil, and then surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, right? I mean, just like you said, the confidence that comes in verse 6 and the comfort that we can take in knowing that we're going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I love it.
Let me get your feedback on this and the rest of y'all's feedback as well, because I literally wrote down about the contrast between 6 and 4, because it's really hard to reconcile what is being said in verse 6, that surely goodness and surely mercy shall follow me. But then what did I just talk about? The first 1,000 years of Christian history.
Right.
Like, what did we talk about all the time whenever we kind of laugh at Christians that expect things to just work out for them all the time? And so because of actual persecution that's happening, most of that's not happening in America, by the way, but because of actual Christian persecution that's happening, and really the downstream consequences of the fall, it's really hard to reconcile verses 4 and 6 or just those two attitudes overall.
Well, and even just like, even backing up further in verse 3, right? Like a path of righteousness for his name's sake will contain a shadow of the valley of the shadow of death, right? And can end in goodness and mercy. So, it's, the whole thing when you look at it as a whole is just, it's reality. We all know it. Like it's what we're living. It's not a promise of comfort and ease.
I could be wrong about this, but I feel like also our perception and assumption when we're reading this is we're thinking about our life while we're here on earth. And on verse 4, that's what it's talking about. But verse 6, there's a shift. And the shift, it says, we're going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Well, we're not going to live on earth forever. So this positive part, surely your goodness and love will follow me. That's true on earth, but it's also true after we leave earth. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I look at that and I look at this part in 5 and 6 where he says, you have anointed me with oil. So you have chosen me. And because you have chosen me, my cup overflows and mercy will follow me and I will dwell in the house of the Lord. Spurgeon had a quote that said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will feel no evil or fear no evil. The storm breaks on the mountain, but the valley is the place of the quietude. And thus often the last days of Christians are the most peaceful of their whole career. The mountain is bleak and bare, but the valley is rich with golden sheaves. And many saints have reaped more joy and knowledge when they came to die than they ever did when they lived. Like that's the thing. Like there's gonna be so much more dwelling in the house of the Lord when we're dead than there is in this life that we live right now.
Absolutely, guys. Psalm 23 is a heavy one. Any other thoughts on Psalm 23 before we let you guys roll out? Again, shout out to Matt Chandler for what he said about Psalm 23. Again, if you have not seen this before, if I can remember, I'll put it in the show notes, but just go to Google and search Matt Chandler, Stephen Furtick. You'll get the elephant room where they kind of had a little bit of a spat back and forth. Just know that the Code Orange revival presentation happened after the elephant room. So it happened after that. And so it's just interesting regarding the context, but we're just going to have to leave it there for now. But guys, come back here next week where we are going to dig into Psalm 42. So make sure you spend some time reading Psalm 42. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. Just a reminder, we've got the starter set, the forging table starter set from Crossway. All that information is here in the show notes. We've also got all the information to where you can get the Logos Bible software. And guys, if we haven't told you this before, it's because it was a dereliction of duty, because we are a donation-based ministry. The only way we're able to pull off things like the forging table is because we have guys exactly like you that are bought into the mission of equipping men around the globe to push back darkness. The only way to do that is because we have one-time and monthly donors that hop on board and help us. We would ask you to consider doing so. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.